Islam, Hotep, Assalamu alaikum, peace, and love to all. Wishing you a happy, holy day here in the present Moroccan Empire. I am your servant, Sheikhess Moal Diana Love L, here with Moorish News Media 7, Blood on the Doorpost 6, returning to journalistic integrity. I would like to wish all the Moors all over the world happy Independence and Memorial Day. We are celebrating our Independence Day, the day the meeting was held in Havana, Cuba, where our,
It wasn't the meeting date.
pardon me, can you elaborate, Brother Grand Sheik,
Islam Sheikhs.
on the 20th
Praises
of
due to
July?
Allah, Lord, Governor, cherisher, sustainer, ruler of the world, blood on the doorpost 6. The Moorish Memorial and the Moorish Independence Day. The meeting that was held, she's referring to was on July the 20th, which was amongst a group of members of the Moorish Science Temple of America. This is the act that brought us into our autonomous sovereignty as a Moorish state, and being that body politic. So
Islam.
will
And
we
a year later, our beloved prophet transitioning, which brought it into
Moorish
the memorial.
independence, and it's truly a dual day of recognition as it relates to our status and setting us up, and the differentiation that you see once again amongst our culture. So it's not July the 4th, it's July the 20th.
20th, our Independence Day,
Islam.
where we set off the fireworks and we get out and we
Islam.
party
That's
in the
it.
parks and we
That's right.
enjoy our
Barbecue,
lives, our
yes,
children,
Islam.
and we show love to one another because we are the children of one Father, provided for by His care. And thank you once again, Grand Sheik, for joining me in part 6 of Blood on the Doorpost, returning to journalistic integrity.
Islam.
It is time to return to that integrity. And I show part 5, I wanted to add, and as the Grand Sheik said, make it plain, make it clear, clean it up. We spoke about that
The Palestinian,
Liberation Organization and the Moors' plight being similar, how the Palestinians strap on bombs and they run into crowds and they're fighting. And the reason is what I want to
Islam.
speak on that is because the Palestinians are fighting at a disadvantage. They have no weapons like the enemy that are fighting against them to drop bombs and machine guns. So these people are willing to go to any length
Islam, Sheikh,
to protect their land. Can you elaborate on that,
yes.
Grand Sheik?
Islam, as you said before, we brought up the Palestinians so that we can draw the comparison between the Moors and the Palestinians. Now, let's go into the Palestinian situation a bit. There is a settlement that was set up back during the 1940s where one group of people claim because the Bible says that they have a right to be in that land, that created a rift because now what you have is the Israelis who have set up a settlement where they're taking over various properties and they're moving the people who are indigenous to the land further back, and they're pushing them out their homes to a disadvantage. Now, the United States supports the state of Israel as far as what they're doing against the Palestinian people. And this is only because they say, well, we have a right, the Bible says that we have a right to this land. So ever since then, this has created a rift within the Middle East and the so-called Middle East. So you have the Palestinian people who are at a disadvantage and who do not have the support of the United States to continue to maintain their estate, their ancestral home. So they don't have the weapons, the rocket launchers, the M16s, all of the conventional weaponry that a nation would have to protect itself and its interests. Whereas the Israeli government is fully stocked. They have all of the complete, they have a navy, up-to-date weapons that, are pretty much top-notch. Even though they're a small nation, they are fully stocked.
So how can
to take the Palestinians and blow them back to the Stone Ages. Meanwhile,
is that
on the
unfair?
other side of the battlefield, you have the Palestinian people who have rocks and bottles, and they're throwing it at troops that are shooting them down. So can you imagine a war where one side they have machine guns, knives, swords, they have any weapon that you can dream of, and then on the other side they just got sticks and bottles and rocks.
And this is
And
why
this
they
is part of the reason
bombs
why
to them.
this is part of the reason why they have taken to such extreme tactics to strap bombs up against them and to run into crowded areas, civilian areas, where their enemies are situated. Now, when they put it on the newspaper and they characterize these things that's going on, now all of a sudden the people who have the least of the resources are terrorists, because they have taken to the extreme to go and to any lengths to show these people that they're willing to fight and to make sure that they're uncomfortable and their belief that they can take their land away from them.
So how are the Moors?
Now, now I already know where you're going,
Okay.
Shikas. Now, compare and contrast with the Moors over here. Whereas the Palestinian people are aware of who they are, they're aware of the threats. The Moors are not. Most of the Moors are not aware of the threat that's against them and their ancestral estate, and the fact that they have a legacy, the fact that they have a birthright. Why do you think that there have been millions, if not trillions, invested by the current journalistic? And this goes back to the dark priesthood that's been set up collectively by the scribes and these lawyers to continue to push the false narrative that a whole nation of people are Negroes, blacks, coloreds, African Americans, coon, shine. Let's deal with the word black, for example. If you had any journalistic integrity, you would know automatically. You would have stopped using black back during the time of the 1920s when the Prophet Noble Ali stated that our men of letters are struggling to find a name that's proper for the Moorish American. So instead, there's no struggle, because they are completely aware of who we are as they are completely aware of who they are. It's just like if you wake up in the middle of the night and you find a burglar in your house, they're going to know there's not going to be a situation, well, the burglar is retarded and he thought that he was in his house. No, because you're going to see there's evidence that he broke in. Mm-hmm. There's evidence that he was there against the will of the owner. Just like when you look at these situations where they talk about Manifest Destiny and Christopher Columbus and all these wars up until 1812, when the Moorish flag went down and it was resurrected by the Prophet Noble Ali in 1913. So they have been aware. It's not like they don't know.
Okay.
They understand exactly what it is. So we're not going to try to make it easy for the crook and say, well, maybe the crook is mentally challenged. Like we've seen with situations where our people are being assaulted, and maybe there's someone, they'll take the kid's glove and they'll put them on when it comes to dealing with these European supremacists, these groups that have these guns and they're lovers of God and country and all of that. They give them a free pass. And oftentimes we'll see where the Ku Klux Klan has a police escort. So this is how we know that it's systemic. And this is how we know that it's nationalistic. Nationality is the order of the day. So when they posted that flag during that incident, that was a signal to not just the international arena, that was a signal to all of the Moors to stand up for what was brought for us, what was intended for us, what's supposed to be our legacy, because it's very disrespectful for you to be in a situation where you're referring to us as sovereign citizens when you know a nation is sovereign anyway.
Absolutely.
So how dare you try to attach sovereign citizenship to the true Moors, to the ones that truly represent this flag,
indigenous,
which is red, land. Which is a red flag with the 5-pointed green star in the center. This is part of the reason why the inquisitionists have utilized people that look like us and tools that speak out of term that are not real Moors, because the real Moors are going to follow the instructions
of the prophet,
which is sent by the great God.
Absolutely.
So let us not put this on. Let's not try to marginalize this
Pardon
and
me. Yes.
compartmentalize. Put it in a small little box and yeah, put it
It is
away in a
what it
space,
is.
or try to sweep it under the rug. This is
Yes.
very much a reality check, because how are you going to come into somebody else's home and try to mischaracterize who they are, unless this is conquest, imperialistic conquest and policy that's set up to go against the truly indigenous people of the land.
They are set up, and this is imperialism. These are international infractions, and the Moors here on their land, this is the present Moroccan Empire, we are in distress, in dire distress, and we are calling out to the international community for support. Because what we have is a nation of people that has invested billions, if not trillions, into keeping a nation of people from proclaiming their nationality.
They've been working
away
every
from
scheme.
our birthrights. And this scheme has been, what do you call it? This is one of the greatest Hollywood productions the Guinness Book of World Records
Has
have
ever
ever
seen.
known or seen.
That's correct.
being
In other words,
practiced
let
today?
me put that into proper perspective.
Thank you.
They have all these actors, lawyers, scribes, that pretend that they don't know where they come, that pretend to be indigenous to the land. So when these Europeans get to saying, "Oh, I'm an American," no, you're not. You are not an American as it relates to your status and your line of descent. You don't trace yourself back to the indigenous people over here. You trace yourself back to Europe. We go back to the Dark Ages, and we have a history of where we taught you how to wash up, we taught you culture, we taught you science. And what did you do? You used that against us.
Defining the threat further, Grand Sheik, what are some of the tools the imperialistic inquisitionists are using
Well,
today?
the weapons of war are words.
The words.
The words, the communication. They have weaponized certain words like Negro, black, and colored. So if you refer to yourself as black, then that's open season on you. And you have our people out here that are aware of these threats and that wear fez and turbans, and they're tools of these inquisitionists, these imperialistic individuals.
Let's talk about the media magnets now and the attorneys that are actually hiding and protecting and furthering the avalanche of lies that the inquisitionists are using, because they're working hand in hand.
Well, whenever you hear the term Moorish sovereign citizen, or whenever you hear them trying to denationalize our people and to try to pretend like the Moors are blacks, that's when you see the weaponized. That's when you have to recognize and target the threat. The threat comes from an organized effort to continue to exploit our birthright. And this is the collection of the black robe judges and these media magnates that are being paid off by those who have been benefiting from our economic demise. So these are the same people that have been selling off or pretending to sell off our lands, pretending that bank loans can be acquired to purchase our lands.
And the international
And
community
there
have
is
eyes upon
and
this.
there is no permission has ever been given for any of the pale-skinned nations to Europe to purchase any land over here
Using a
within the
fraudulent
present Moroccan
mortgage.
Empire or the Moorish Empire. None of them have received permission. In fact, we are several decades from receiving a gold tribute that they were supposed to be given. So what you have is you have nations full of squatters. Why do you think that the prophet mentioned that during the divine warning that every nation had to
Worship up under his own
No. He said that they had to answer up to the constitutional
constitutional
principle.
fold. That's right.
So that means that they had to proclaim. He said if the Italians, Greeks, Jews are forced to proclaim their nationality, then it is no more right for the so-called Negro, black, or color. Why is that? Because that brings everything back to square one. Someone's got to claim the birthright and somebody's got to take to some water. So imperialism implies that there's a policy in place to combat against the Moors who are indigenous and who chooses to follow the instructions of the prophet, who was divinely prepared and sent by the great God.
I want to share this charter because our organization, the Moorish Science Temple of America, as a body politic, is lawfully chartered.
And let me say something
And
before you
these
go into that,
charters-
beloved, because we understand
Yes,
that many
sir.
people have been circulating this document, but make no mistake, if you do not have the permission, if you have not been authorized by the proper administration, then you do not have the authorization to use this document.
Because this is a document that was authorized by the Prophet Noble Joe Ali to be used by the Moorish
As
Science
a
Temple
charter,
of America. As a charter
To be
body
issued
politic.
to the various states.
Throughout the United
It
States.
reads that the Moorish Science Temple of America is a lawfully chartered and incorporated organization. Any subordinate temple that desires to receive a charter, the prophet has to issue throughout the United States, etc. What you have to understand is that is the imperialistic aspect of where we are extending the dominion of the present Moroccan Empire. So anything in contradiction to that, that would be a foe. This is what we're seeing when we see them trying to mischaracterize and say that the state has the authority to authorize any activities against the Moors. So this charter being issued to the very states, it puts the states on notice.
That's right. And it
Because
protects.
there's a process where there has to be mandatory judicial notice issued to the states. And this is part of the process of the procedure so that we know and we understand. And these people know because this has been on record since
It's a contract.
1928.
That's right.
This is a contract this is the only contract that we are allowed to authorize and to demonstrate with since it's
Outside
with
the
the state of
treaty,
Illinois because
Islam.
it's signed by the founder, Prophet Noble Joe Ali. These are the only statutes as it relates to the Religious Corporation Act that we're supposed to have any conversation with. Anything outside of that is unauthorized and unconstitutional.
Absolutely. The fallen sons and daughters of the Asiatic nation of North America need to learn to love instead of hate and to know of his higher self and lower self. This is the uniting of the Holy Quran of Mecca for the teaching and instructions of all Moorish Americans, etc. So what we have is a nation of people.
Let me highlight two things. You have two empires.
Go ahead.
You have
Go
the
ahead.
present Moroccan Empire and you have the Moorish Empire.
Okay.
And then, in contradiction to that, you have the Roman Empire.
Okay.
So, but what the people need to understand is where they fit into the whole scheme of things as it relates to the designation of these nations, the body politic.
Define the threat.
Prophet
Nancy.
explained to you that the head of Satan was taken off in Byzantine in 1453.
Right.
Understand that that was an empire.
That was an empire.
And that empire, vestiges of that empire still exist. So this is where the threat comes in the form of the church, not necessarily as institution of worship, but as a tool of the imperialistic aspirations of inquisitionists. Because this was the vehicle that was used. We're not saying that every Christian that's praying is evil, but what we're saying is that the institution of the church has been utilized by inquisitionists that have imperialistic aspirations to spread their own empire. And this is what we're facing in a court of public opinion. This is what we're facing when we go up against a media that is unforgiving, that is sacrilegious, that is treasonous, and that is traitorous.
Very much so. You
They're
said it
not.
all,
They're
Grand Chief.
not batting for our team.
And they know the truth.
And no Moorish Americans should be speaking on their platform without authorization from the proper administration. Otherwise, they're slaves and they're fake as can be.
This is what blood on the doorpost is all about, everyone. The prophet knew what it was. He chose diplomacy over a military force because the prophet knew the day would come where this war would switch and it would go from the battle on the ground to spiritual warfare.
Islam,
spiritual warfare. Let me complete the thought more.
I have
this
to say
is why
the
the prophet said, Islam, you got the floor. This is why the prophet said, go to those who know law and act in an intelligent tone, and you will get a favorable reply. No more that the war is still being waged in court by this administration, Moorish Science Temple of America, as a body politic today as we speak. You have the floor, Grand Sheikh.
Islam, Sheikh, I just want to speak to the nation and let them know that just because the prophet chose a diplomatic route does not mean that we should not have a military or a nation. These are all things that are common with nations.
Now, before we end the show, because we have a few minutes left, I want you to talk about how the Moors are being able to fight this war. Because the Palestinians, of course, we don't, we're not saying go and strap something on you to hurt someone, but what we are saying is that we have to stand up, fight land today. We have to fight back. What ways are the Moors fighting today? We see the rise of the Moors there who are being, who has the flag inverted. What are the Moors doing here in North America?
Well, what we're doing now is we're fighting within the court of public opinion. We're fighting within the courts. This is now an intellectual, spiritual warfare. It's beyond the bombs and the bullets. Now the people have to begin to utilize their minds. That's why the prophet said, if I can get you to think, you can save yourselves.
So, brother, we are fighting for the hearts and the minds
and the souls
of our people
Correct.
right here today in North America. Join us. We love you all with the love that will never die. Stand up for who you are. Find out who you are. Proclaim your nationality. You are not Negro, black, color, African American. Recognize and realize when you're being warred against. When schools start to leave your community and stores start to leave your community, you know that you're being warred against. When the bus services is cut from different areas and you can no longer get around to shop and to do what you need to do, know that you're being warred against. Domestic war, because there are many forms of war. And right now, what form of war is being put forth now against our people, you would say, Grand Sheikh? We talked about it.
I would say that it's intellectual warfare. I would say that it's a war that's being waged within the media. The prophet made a reference to the press being better than a standing army. We need to realize and understand and meet the challenge where it's being presented. And that's within the media. That's part of the reason why we have massive lawsuits planned to go against these traitors and to prove the facts that they are really exhibiting foreign policy.
Now that we have properly defined a threat and we know who the enemy is, it is time to unite. It is time for the international community to unite with us, and all who are fighting for their land. It's time for all of us to unite as one. Nationality is the order of the day. We love you with the never-dying love. Remember, you are what you eat. Eat to live. Allah says, God says, the fruit is the meat and the leaf is the medicine. In order for you to think like a God, you must begin to eat. Return to the seed. Every green herb bearing a seed is meat for man. I love you and I thank you for joining us. Blood on the Doorpost, Part 5 and 6, returning to journalistic integrity.
Islam.